What name are you bringing to the podcast and why? The No Shame in My Name podcast is a platform that celebrates and documents the stories behind names. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at No Shame in My Name Pods.
Edit, a well-organized, thoughtful piece on the chemical properties of cactus juice. And so you learn skills that are absolutely valuable to the wider world. And we're seeing that more and more as people who get PhDs are not necessarily doing it for the purpose of teaching in a university.
Hello, students and graduates. Welcome to PhD Lounge, the podcast of late-night interviews where PhD students have a drink and talk about their research topics. I am your host, Luis, and many things have been going on both on my PhD and the podcast. Let me give you an update on what has happened during the past months of June and July. First and foremost, I was at Oxford in late June doing my field research for my PhD project. There, I gathered older and modern sources to write some substantial notes for my subsequent case studies about ancient cities in the Near East and the archaeological findings in art and architecture that show any instance of a hybrid culture and third space events that led to the construction of cities like Palmyra, Dura Europus, Hatra, or Antioch on the Orontes. As for the research cities, I chose Hatra as it is, according to the sources, an eerie town where religion was predominant. However, it does not have any example of ancient literary evidence related to Hatra's inhabitants' daily life. The literature we have is from Cassius Dio and Herodian, who talk about the Roman-Parthian wars during the campaign of Septimius Severus, but in an unusual and biased perspective. Archaeology is more reliable when talking about Hatra, as the reports contain inscriptions in different languages such as Greek, Latin, Aramaic, pointing out names for people who lived in Hatra, small and life-size sculptures, pottery, coins, and building restorations that have been done throughout the 20th century. On the other hand, I barely know anything about Hatra, and it would be exciting to describe it for my project to increase my knowledge of ancient urbanism and learn more about other ancient cities that are, to an extent, less famous to the new academics and general public. My stay at Oxford was excellent, with lots to do beyond the research, having the chance to eat at 3 restaurants of Nando's with the right of having a discount since I am a Nando's employee, and the opportunity to visit the Ashmolean Museum where I saw an exhibition about the city of Knossos and the uncanny Cretan labyrinth. According to Greek mythology, and if you have read Homer, the Cretan labyrinth was not only a structure that was a reference in the Knossos urbanism, art and architecture, but also housed the monstrous Minotaur, a half-human and half-bull creature. The Minotaur, in order to live, had to eat 7 male and female youths and maidens, respectively, and according to the myth, Theseus fought and slayed the Minotaur with the help of Ariadne, the daughter of Cretan king Minos, putting an end to the suffering of all the youths and maidens that were subjected to the Minotaur's hunger. The exhibition lasted until the 30th of July. And, like myself, if you had the opportunity to watch it, I am happy for you to witness an incredible display of archaeological evidence about Knossos and the mythical tale of the Minotaur and the Cretan labyrinth. Aside from my field research at Oxford, I'm also updating previous drafts of my PhD dissertation to restructure the written English and relevant aspects about cultural hybridity and third space for the project overall, for the case studies of the cities Palmyra, Jururopus, and Hatra. Hopefully for myself, my supervisor, and the examiner, whoever the department will choose those I selected, either Dr. Ted Kaiser and Professor Jen Baird, all my drafts will become solid and convincing for when I will defend them at the Viva Voce in the foreseeable future. As for the PhD Lounge podcast, many updates have been made throughout July after my late night interview with Gabriela Radulescu. One of them was setting up a blog for those who enjoy writing texts expressing their experiences about anything. Now you can write and submit your blog on the podcast's website, where you can write about your experience as a first-year PhD student. Me and Natalie Jarvis, who manages the website and is also a PhD student at Swansea University, will read and consider your blog submission to be published on the website. So when you have time, consider writing about your experience when you were a first-year PhD student, and we will wait for your submission. Besides the blog and another admin updates of the website, I also want to adapt the concept of the PhD Lounge. I want to invite PhD graduates and postdocs in the future to keep increasing the outreach, network, and popularity of the PhD Lounge, providing their experiences and ways of conducting research. Nonetheless, the central conceptualization of the PhD Lounge remains in having current PhD students sharing their PhD struggles, research, and advice for other students that want to pursue a PhD. Current PhD students are my main goal, and with this new adaptation, I hope that any listener tuning in to the PhD Lounge will enjoying it. I have more updates to share with you, but I will tell them in the future sessions and late night interviews. So stay tuned, and I promise you to say any update that comes on the horizon of the PhD Lounge podcast. Now, let's turn to today's session. Today, we have a late night interview with two guests who are PhD graduates and authors of a book called PhDone, a professional dissertation editor's guide to writing your doctoral thesis and earning your PhD. A book which talks about advice and steps to take from the beginning until the end of the PhD through personal stories of various PhD students, including the authors themselves. An outstanding book which I read before the interview, and all I can say is that you will find that this book is a friendly guide with many examples on how to achieve success during the PhD. And who does not like hearing captivating stories and challenges from other people that overcame their difficulties to reach success? If you like to hear successful stories, then the book PhDone is definitely for you if you are struggling with your PhD journey. The book will be released on the 8th of August, so wherever you buy your favorite books, pre-order PhDone. As for the authors, one is the CEO and editor-in-chief, while the second is the vice president of editing and research at Dissertation Editor, an American company that serves excellence and professionalism in aiding PhD students to complete their dissertations with professional editing, structure, proofreading, and formatting. With a vast network with many universities and having assisted many students, Dissertation Editor is America's premier dissertation and thesis service. And with their team of professional editors, your dissertation will become professionally accredited and have a whole new level over the eyes of your PhD supervisors and examiners. Feel free to check on Dissertation's Editor website for more information about their services, the team behind the PhD writing and editing magic, and most importantly, PhDone book. So grab your seats, have a drink, and let's give a warm welcome to Doctors Alan Roda and Lauren Saunders. Hi, Doctors Roda and Saunders. Welcome to the PhD Lounge, and it is a pleasure to have you and to present your book, PhDone, to be released on the 8th of August, and which the listeners at the release of our late night interview on this day are having not only the access to your book, but also hearing from the authors themselves about, obviously, PhD. And I would like to start with the common question about your journeys on how you got into the PhD and how your PhD journey led to write PhDone and found Dissertation Editor.
Well, I'll go first. I was an undergraduate studying anthropology, and I was really just very excited to explore the world and all of the different types of people in it. And when I realized that by studying anthropology, I could keep doing that, then I just didn't want to stop. So for me, it was, I was just very, very excited about the research. And remember when I got into my PhD program, exclaiming, "Someone's going to pay me to sit around and read books all day. This is the best job ever." And, I had other friends who had sort of barely made it out of undergraduate who did not feel that way at all. So for me, I got into it really just out of passion and love of learning and traveling and research. But as for PhDone, and of course Dissertation Editor, it really came up towards the end of my dissertation process when I got stuck formatting my dissertation. I couldn't get the page numbers to work or the table of contents to work for the life of me. I still laugh that I actually produced 2 PDF files with separate page numbers and then merged them together. And that was how I finally figured out how to do it, because I would never advise that to anyone now. But so, I realized this is really hard, and I thought there's got to be somebody who could just do this for people. And we realized there wasn't really anyone who could just do this for people. And so we realized, oh, look, maybe I could just start doing this for people. So that was kind of how Dissertation Editor got started. After working with, thousands of grad students over the years, we realized, not everyone has reached out to us for help or can or needs to, and we should really put some resources out there that are accessible to absolutely everyone. And that's where the book came in. It was really in a desire to make the dissertation process understandable, accessible, and available, really, to anyone who's considering it, so that they know what they're getting into ahead of time and can figure out how to move through it gracefully.
Sure. And what was your journey, Lauren?
Yeah, similar for me, and thanks so much for having us. It's great to be on the show. I majored in undergrad in dance and creative writing, some ostensibly impractical subjects, and I wasn't sure what to do with those next. I got the question very often, so are you going to be a teacher? And grad school seemed like the logical next step. But I also really loved the process of producing undergraduate capstone papers for both of those degrees, which made me realize that the research and the producing original knowledge was what I loved the most about both of those areas of study. So I went into a master's program in Dublin, studied Irish literature there, and from then went into a PhD at the University of Denver in literary studies. So very similar in terms of just somebody's going to pay me to read books and tell people what I think of them was wonderful. But the thing I actually loved most during my whole higher education career, and the job I loved most during the PhD, was working in writing centers and helping other people with their writing in that way. And then finishing up the PhD, and as the funding was running out, I thought, what can I do remotely that uses this degree? And that's when I found Dissertation Editor and met Alan and came on as a freelancer with the company and been around ever since.
So we can say all of this, where there's a problem, there's always a solution. And we And as PhDs, there's plenty of ways to grasp some of those solutions that we have to craft it. But it's really interesting how your journeys matched and your ambitions of doing something for the PhD community to contribute for the outstanding experience led to write this book, PhDone, which I gotta say, I've read the whole book in 2-3 days, and several of the aspects that both of you touched upon, it kind of resembles when I started my PhD, because it was something that, like, I was having a conversation with the book and pointing out some of the flaws that I had at the start of it, and how then, upon conversations with my advisor, we say here supervisor, then some of those solutions came out through my probation, as we have here in the UK. I don't know if you had that also, Lauren, in Dublin. I don't know if you had also, Dr. Roda, if you had that the probation meeting where we say all the things that we have to defend. So kind of like a simulation, to say the least. But I could say that upon what I've read, it's a educational book, really strict. From what it's my interpretation, really strict and really suggestive, entertaining as well, and to see the other side of what the PhD is, and taking all those stereotypical views of the general public. This PhD is hard, it's taking me too long time, and I don't want to write 100k words or 75k words, or even going into academia. There's always a solution. And Dissertation Editor is one of them, those experiences. So, now we're going to get, what is the ethos of PhDone? And why sharing personal stories across your book? What effect does it have?
That's a great question. And I think going back to what you were just saying about, there always being a solution to a problem, I think one of the things we've found through working with so many dissertation writers over the years is that, no matter what the subject area, the dissertation has some of the same goals in terms of how to present research in a way that the scholarly community can understand and how to structure the document. So some of those more specific sections about what to include and what not to include are really a result of seeing how different successful dissertations across a broad range of fields work well. And, my background being in literature, I've worked, in dissertations way outside my field, probably the most different being a dissertation on the chemical properties of cactus juice, which was amazing to me as an editor, just seeing how, even though that couldn't be further from my subject matter expertise, but I was still able to see, this is the way that your argument is progressing, and this is the way that your organization could be improved. So I think that's one of the takeaways, that in terms of the structural elements, there are common threads across fields. And similarly, in terms of the personal experience, it can be really isolating to do a PhD, to be working from home on something that only you understand. And we've also found that by talking to clients that nobody's experience is completely unique. If you have a problem during your PhD in terms of your relationship with your advisor, your work-life balance, any of those things that are outside of the dissertation document itself, the odds are that somebody else has had a similar experience. So just bringing real stories to a broader audience, our hope there is that it'll make people realize that they're not alone in those struggles. Everyone has similar experiences with that, and we're all in this together as PhD candidates.
Yes, and that you're absolutely, you touched the point that we're all in this together, and with those experiences, telling stories, people get fascinated by hearing stories from others and what they can learn from them, so that they can also take their next step and go through it, and facing those adversities, and how would they let's just say again, providing those solutions to improve themselves and reaching the milestone. So it is really interesting hearing the stories you've written about the book. One of them I was really fascinating. I believe was a PhD student called Rick. I know it's romanticized names, so it was calling about Rick about his issues, his alcoholism, and then had a partner at the time. The partner couldn't be so supportive, and then ended up breaking up. But that episode that I read about Rick is a matter of going over the problem to reach a solution, which was doing the PhD and finalizing it with excellence. That one of the stories that I got most fascinated with. Have you, one of you, when you were writing the book, which story was more touching from which one of you?
We've had so many stories from so many students. It was actually really hard for us to kind of decide who gets included and who doesn't, and also which stories we could make sufficiently anonymous to make sure that nobody was being identified. But for me, the stories that really resonate are from people who are just working so hard. And I'm always in awe of students who manage to work full-time jobs, take care of families, and write dissertations all at the same time. And many of them are working on things that I'm just honored to be part of. They're working to make nurses better nurses and to make teachers better teachers. And just to have a chance to support them in that and help them through the hurdles that they're facing with the skills that we have, it's an honor. And I'm always moved when I get a chance to speak to our clients about the work that they're up to in the world. And that's one of the exciting things about doctoral level research is that they're breaking new ground. We're learning things that nobody has ever known before, each and every time. And so that for me is really, really beautiful.
Well, and what about you, Dr. Saunders? Any story that was more that you had was hardly felt?
Absolutely, yeah. So there are two stories in the book in which dissertation writers had to virtually start over. One in the plagiarism section, where a writer had relied much too heavily on a previous literature review on the same topic, and that made this writer really need to start the research process over and figure out how to synthesize the literature in their own way instead of relying on this existing literature review. And that was really an inspiring situation to me. And just the drive to not only do the whole dissertation writing and research process, but to need to take a big step back and start with a clean slate, and the motivation needed to do that. There's a similar story where a writer thought that they were almost done, and then found out from their advisor that it was more of, I think she thought she was in terms of the final proofread and formatting stage, and then it turned out that there were major content issues, and it ended up being more of a year-long revise and resubmit process. So again, just the real firm belief in the research and that it's worth doing and revising and redoing until it's right. So those two stories stood out to me as really inspiring ones.
It takes tenacity to do a dissertation, and that's something that we're often inspired by the people we work with, is that there is a commitment and a drive and a passion that you have to even start the process. Nobody goes into it lightly.
Sure.
And so it's a beautiful thing to witness.
Yes, and I agree. And with all those experiences, hearing those stories should be an inspiration, plus another big inspiration for students who strive, because I think that in due future, the PhD degree will be a demanding degree for many students, and that happens with already in academia, but I'm assuming in industry jobs they starting to request PhD degree. And hearing those experiences, they think people should be aware of taking out of the equation that public opinion. And it kind of amazes me hearing such incredible stories. But then comes this issue of accumulations. And I have the question for you, Dr. Saunders, that I found when I was reading chapter 2, and that I found that finding the reason behind why PhD students accumulate many things over their dissertation and overall life duties. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of you.
So I would say there are kind of two ways to look at that. And first, the PhD and the graduate school process itself, involves that accumulation you're talking about. So, writing the dissertation, as we mentioned in the book, would be a lot more straightforward if that was the only thing that you were responsible for. But, within the structure of your PhD program, that's obviously not your only responsibility. I mean, most people are responsible for teaching several courses or research assistant duties at a minimum. On top of that, there's, can be university service expected, serving on a board of a journal or in graduate student leadership. So the graduate school experience itself, takes on quite a bit of additional responsibility that needs to be balanced with the work of writing the dissertation. And then, of course, there's everything else in life as well. So, as adults, sure, everyone's got additional responsibilities on top of the PhD that's constituting the job at the time, whether that's a second job, a side hustle, working on the PhD, on top of an existing full-time career, which many of the writers we work with are experiencing, as well as things like household, family, keeping everything else in your life running, and taking care of yourself as well, the mental health and self-care
sure,
that any dissertation writer needs to do to make sure that they're taking care of themselves as well.
Sure. No, I mean, it's again the additional things that occupies a lot, especially when studying full time, which is I think it is a major adversity for PhD students who want to complete the degree as soon as possible to get into the job market. Don't know. Probably the studying PhD part-time alleviates that stress, but still comes another weight, because it will be too long. It will be taking long 6-7 years, plus the full-time job that they're doing, and might not even the job that they are working on or they desire to working on. Those are additional responsibilities, and sometimes it can be a burden and all that. So, What is your opinion on accumulating many duties, Dr. Roda?
I mean, in many ways, that's also sort of the beauty of Dissertation Editor and the support we provide, is that there's a lot to life, and one of the things that our service has enabled people to do is let go of some of the less important pieces. They can have someone else check every reference against their citations and make sure that the APA style is perfect, but they can focus on the big ideas. And by taking some of those things off their plates, we help people finish faster and with less stress. And I think it's hard to say, which path is the right one, or the easier one, or the better one. Some people go straight from undergrad into their PhD programs, and they're able to do that without all the extra responsibility of, families and careers and jobs and mortgages and everything else that comes with being an adult. And other people, we have clients in their 70s finishing their PhDs. And it's never too late. I feel like is a really important message we like to bring home in this book, that finishing a PhD, it starts and begins with a passion for the research and for learning, and that can happen at all ages. So for some people, they wait till they're retired and then they do their PhD, and for some people, it's they're straight out of college. There's no right way, there's no wrong way, but it's not a surprise to me that the majority of the people we work with are the ones who are juggling a lot of other responsibilities. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, sure, I agree with you. And as you touched another important aspect, that PhD is for everyone, everyone of different aging rates. One of the interviews that I had on my on the PhD Lounge was a PhD student called David Finch. He's also studying English literature, about studying the life and works of Arnold Bennett, and he was talking about his age, and he said that, I'm doing this because it's a passion, and I'm retiring. I was a school teaching, and I was doing cycling as a hobby, and I've done it a lot, and then decided to retire. And then, now what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a PhD. That's what he said. And this subject that he studied a lot, he studied and gave English literature throughout his career, so he decided to increase his knowledge. And he said it. There's no age limit. Anyone is welcome to do it. But on the other hand, I think for us youngsters like myself and other ones who aspire to do a PhD, I believe isn't just the passion itself. It's just more striving for a job, essentially, forgetting all the passion. And I do believe with the PhD slowly being a demanding degree for any type of job, then there will be more young adults to achieving that ambition. I don't know if do you agree?
I think we've seen that already a bit with the master's degree. So it seems like 20 or 30 years ago, a bachelor's degree was all that anyone needed, and now a master's degree seems to be kind of a baseline level. It's like the master's degree is the new bachelor's degree, and the PhD is almost the new master's. It's like the competition is greater, I'm guessing. And so there's just, in order to rise to the top and stand out, there's an advantage to having some extra credentials. And, as we discuss as well in our book, the research is transferable. These are important skills that you learn in the doctoral journey that are not strictly related to the subject matter. Learning how to write a well-organized, thoughtful piece on Irish literature can help you edit a well-organized, thoughtful piece on the chemical properties of cactus juice. Sure. And so you learn skills that are absolutely valuable to the wider world. And we're seeing that more and more as people who get PhDs are not necessarily doing it for the purpose of teaching in a university.
Sure. No, absolutely true. And as we were saying before, that the PhD, it's not only the way out to academia, but also for industry jobs, working in museums, for example, parks, labs, anything that is related to whether industry or academia. So now I have a question now for Dr. Saunders, that I was reading chapter 2, and in the last 2 sections it was dedicated to finding the writing editor. and also the establishment of boundaries, which is, I think for me, it's an important aspect in PhD, establishing boundaries, both professional and personal. But I think these two aspects of the finding a writing editor and establishment of boundaries have much of an interconnection when it comes to feedback and writing style and structure. And do you believe, Dr. Saunders, that not being realistic with investing wisely on professional editing of the dissertation can lead to a boundary breakdown between PhD students / advisor relationship, because the advisor might know that the whole writing structure was completely altered, and the student, to an extent, might have ignored the advisor's feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it all comes down to, the wise use of your resources, whether those are, financial or time-based or relational. So I would say that you always need to think from the most global, broad, organizational, content-based feedback to the most minute. So of course, the advisor is the person who's going to decide largely whether you earn the degree or not. So I think always starting from the point of the content level, subject matter feedback from the advisor, and putting the time in to make sure that the content is what you want it to be, the broad organization is what you want it to be. And then as you move toward finalizing your content and your methodology, I think that's when bringing in additional support, whether that's an editor, a writing group, whatever you have the access to and the means to attain, is really going to help make sure that your time is being used in the most effective way possible. Our previous conversation made me think of this as well. Just this morning, I've been corresponding with a client who's having a hard time making his page numbers in his table of contents align to the right. And I said, no problem, I will help you, send me your document. And he said, no, I want to figure this out. I don't think I deserve the degree if I can't figure this out. And I keep saying, no, please send me your document. I couldn't get my page numbers to align when I submitted my PhD either. I've only learned that since. Don't waste your time. I can fix it for you in 5 minutes. But he's determined to figure it out himself. So I'm sending him YouTube videos, trying to help him figure it out himself instead. But I think that's a really good example of, that's not the best use of your time as a PhD student. That's something that bringing in somebody who does that on a day-to-day basis is going to save you so much time in the end. And similarly with, I think, feedback from family and friends and, using your support network. I would say, you mentioned the sort of public opinion about a PhD, people not understanding what that process is like being a potential problem there. But I think the relational component is the biggest factor there. So, by the time you reach a PhD, you know who you have or could have a great editing relationship with. So I had some close friends who were working on their PhDs at the same time that, we'd been editing each other's work from undergrad, and I knew that would work really well. So we gave each other great feedback. We made jokes to each other in the comments. We started calling each other by the nicknames of the words we used too often. Sure. I think mine was multifarious for a while. So then I realized I needed to tone down my use of that word in my dissertation. So that was a great relationship and that worked well. But I think people can run into problems when they are relying, and I think especially when it's a partner or spouse, that can be a tricky relationship. You don't want that advisor power dynamic to come into your personal relationships. I had a client whose dissertation I was reading who had his wife comment on the writing, and her comments were still in the margins, and one read, "No offense, but why is the writing still so bad when you've been spending so much time on this?" And I don't know about him, but I took offense on his behalf. And I think that was an example where a professional editor, a more objective source than his spouse, may have been a better choice there. So overall, I would just say using your resources wisely, moving from the broadest to the most specific, and really realizing when bringing in some support is going to save you time that you could be using to do something that is more necessary.
Or saving your marriage. There's that too.
But then, obviously, it's also emotional, and also the feedback. We don't know. The feedback can be quite a cold approach, or can be a warmer approach. There's the constructive one, and there's those that are direct towards. But how does that impact negatively or positively those two versions of the feedback?
That's, again, it's a relationship that you cultivate with your advisor. Sure. And I remember having this conversation actually with someone in my cohort who said, you know what? There's not a lot of people in the world who are allowed to kick my butt. But my advisor is. And I'm okay with it. And I've become okay with it. She can kick my butt and it's okay. And because, I remember having because I got a chapter back from mine. I was just ripped to shreds, and I was, into yeah, but ultimately that's helpful to you. But you've got to, there's a certain process that we go through of, learning how to receive feedback. And every writer grapples with it. Now, that said, advisors can cross a line, and, it is also important to maintain your boundaries, where this question kind of started. And if you feel like there's something truly unacademic, if there's anything kind of personal that's bleeding into your advisor-advisee relationship that makes you feel uncomfortable, then don't let that continue. That's a moment to reach out to someone else on the committee, or maybe even a department chair, and make sure that the relationship stays professional.
Sure.
So, there have been some stories that we've heard, and, so it's there are resources out there if that doesn't work out the way a student would hope it would.
Do you have a story to share on that episode?
Oh man, it's those are kind of dicey. But it's if an advisor's truly crossing the line, then and a student is feeling attacked personally, then clearly this isn't gonna be a productive relationship. And so we have suggested to clients that they consider requesting a new advisor. That's really rare. I will say, I don't want to make it sound like this is common, but I also just don't want to tell people that they should, deal with it. Because if it's really bad, don't deal with it. What's a lot more common is that the advisor is overwhelmed and is advising too many students and is very curt with their comments, and they're doing it very quickly in a way that does not take the emotional needs of the student into consideration. Or more importantly, they're just not writing back, and they're not getting back to them in a timely fashion. And that can be a really frustrating part of the doctoral journey, is managing the expectations around the advisor, and when are you going to hear back, and when has it been too long, and what can you do about it to keep things moving, and what can you expect. And one of the things we advise in the book is for students to talk to other students at the same university who are maybe a little bit further along in the program, and just ask them what their experience is like with their advisors. And if you have the choice to choose your advisor, and not every university and every program offers that, but if you have the opportunity to choose your advisor, do a little research first and get a sense of what that advisor's like with other students, and if you think that's going to work well for you. Because some people work very well with a very formal, very, hard and fast relationship. And some people need things to be a little softer, a little more flowing. And the same professor could be a fantastic advisor for one student and a horrible advisor for another student. And that's another thing to really think about. So when I'm saying not every advisor is great, I'm not saying that any particular professor's a bad advisor. I'm just saying that fit might not be working. And so as a student, it's on you to learn and figure out what you think you're going to need, and then figure out if that is the same style of the different members of your department and who you might want to work with.
Sure. No, it's interesting, and glad that you talked about talking with other students that facing similar issues about their advisors. Here at Swansea University, we have a sort of assembly of PGR students from different courses. We talk about our researches, but also our experiences with our advisors, what struggles we are experiencing, and then in the end, is just as if we are releasing a hot air balloon out of our minds, because we were so drenched of work and also external pressures, family pressures, for example. I say as well, from my personal experience, I get regularly pressure from my mom, especially. I say, when do we finish your PhD? When do you finish your PhD? And I say, have you advanced a lot? I say, I'm still between a rock and a hard place. And I give the expression so that my mom won't bother me. Respect, of course. But those are the things that we have to juggle about, and we were talking, and especially with our supervisors or advisors, and we have to, as you said, well, I agree with you, figuring out what differentiates from a good and then a bad advisor. So that's why these committees are so important to express ourselves, to express with others what we are struggling, and again, providing a solution for it. Well,
and that's also why there's a committee. So the advisor is the most important person on the committee.
Sure.
But they're not the only person on the committee. And the committee serves a purpose to make sure that all of these experts agree that the dissertation writer is worthy of the doctoral degree.
Sure.
And so, these things all have a purpose. These different parts of the process, and why do you have to defend your dissertation, and why does it have to be, so many different readers of the dissertation involved, and that's just to sort of provide a checks and balances to make sure that the work is truly worthy.
Sure.
And that's why those are in place.
No, and I totally agree with you, and it depends on the supervisor, and it can also be a clash of personalities. We never know, and it's really hard to find, if we were on a master's degree and there was a supervisor, and if we choose another supervisor for the PhD, it will be a whole different level. Luckily for me, I have the same supervisor as I had on my master's dissertation, so He knows me really well. I know him really well. He gives constructive feedback, which is a positive one. We have also a personal touch, to say the least, but still professional though. Say, oh, how you've been doing, and family issues once in a while, not much, but still, that's what I think differentiates a good and a not so good supervisor. And for you, Dr. Saunders, including Dr. Roda, will the relationship between supervisor and student affect the student's job prospects as well?
That's a great point. And actually, the anecdote from our book that I was going to mention was a writer who was having a really hard time with the responsiveness of their advisor, sure, and just not hearing back for months at a time. And then when they did get feedback, it was add a comma here, this should be a semicolon, very, very minor proofreading rather than based on content. And he considered, the merits of trying to change an advisor. And a couple of the pieces of advice that we mention that are worth considering in that process are, do you have other sources of support? So are your other committee members more responsive? Are you able to get that support somewhere else? And what's going to be the value of that professional connection and the name of that advisor on your dissertation? And in this instance, the other committee members were great. He was able to get additional support from them that the advisor wasn't providing. And the advisor was a really important scholar in this field. And the decision that this writer ultimately made was that was worth maintaining that relationship and having that name associated with the dissertation for the professional connections, even though the day-to-day back and forth was not providing the extensive support that he wanted. So that's how that situation worked out. So I think that balance between, how important is the person's name and how important are they in the field? Who could they connect you to in terms of other scholars in the area? And what does that relationship look like in the day-to-day?
Sure. How about you, Dr. Roda? Any opinion on it?
Well, I was just thinking of the same story of, career trajectories and advisors. I mean, having that name on your dissertation and that letter of recommendation, I mean, it does go a long way. It's definitely something worth evaluating and considering. And it's one of those things that, again, I would tell any new student to talk to the other students in their cohort and ask them about why they chose their advisor. That's one of the beautiful things is there's always students a few years ahead of you in your program, no matter where you are. And those are resources that I think a lot of people don't see. They don't think about the other students as being really valuable sources of information, but you should really start networking within your cohort from day one. And you can get recommendations from your advisor and also from the other students in your program and from the other members of your committee.
Yes. Yes. So because network is so important. And that is I believe that is one of the, aside from writing the thesis, that's the second hardest characteristic in a PhD, because we trying to network with someone and then they get with this fake promise of saying, okay, I will do that. But then they have other things to do, plenty. And then it's really difficult we meet in person, and then it also comes with the online issue, which is also another major impact in PhD networking. But as I like to think positively, feeling optimistic from what comes ahead, then the network will eventually come up, and it gets stronger and stronger as we take further steps, whether through presenting a paper at a conference or writing an article, and obviously finishing the PhD.
Yeah, I was going to mention actually that the conference attendance is really one of the best places for getting to know other scholars in your field.
Yes.
It's invaluable. And when you get a chance to participate on a panel, for example, then it's great if you can try to do that with people who you don't already know.
Yeah.
And then it's a great chance to meet them, and you really get to know people when you're on a panel with them. And it's a beautiful experience.
Yes, I totally agree with you, especially when we're going to present, not being the attendee. I remember having a talk with a PhD colleague and friend of mine, presenting. He presented his paper in a conference about Egyptology, and he told me once, the only way that you can network with people is when you're standing on the pedestal, on the stage, present your topic, and you argue against their questions. And I felt at the time that he spoke that to me, I already presented in conferences, but at the time I wasn't realizing as well how that small aspect is so important for networking. And then I realized, okay, so I have to think that the conference is only for networking. They might not enjoy the paper, but the conference is for the networking.
Well, and when someone does raise their hand to ask you a controversial question,
yes,
try to remember who that person is and follow up with them later.
Yes.
Because that is someone who cares enough about your scholarship to want to ask you a hard question.
No, it's...
One of the advices I give out often for the defense of a dissertation is to tell people, hey, look, this is the only time in your life where this many highly educated people are going to have given this much thought to your dissertation. It's never going to happen again. So enjoy it. There's no reason a defense has to be an adversarial, combative relationship. It's actually a beautiful opportunity to hear what people think about your work and to take that feedback and make your next piece, your book, your article, even better. And the same goes for a conference paper.
Sure.
Those kinds of challenging questions are the best ones because they're going to help you think through how to improve your arguments for future publication.
Was there any story that you've both of you wrote about a conference paper in PhDone or not? Or maybe similar?
We focus mostly on the dissertation process itself. I think we mostly just encourage people to do conference papers and to get into that world. But I think we try to really maintain the focus of the book on the parts of the doctoral journey. And that is a little bit of a sidestep. I feel like it's important, but it's not a requirement.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned, and a piece of advice for using conferences well I would give is that it's always useful to kind of pair a conference presentation with a self-imposed deadline you need to meet. So I always tried to, when possible, arrange conferences to become a section of a chapter that I needed to write next. So in terms of selecting the topic I would propose at a given conference, a lot of those eventually became sections in later chapters. So it was a great way to have an external deadline to know, I need to present this paper on Friday, so I need to write this section. Can be a little bit more exigent and easy to adhere to than someday I need to write that chapter. So using the material of conferences, not only for networking, but also for advancing the dissertation writing can be useful as well.
Yes, it is an advance. I do agree. As long as it doesn't go off topic of the dissertation, then it's a plus more points for the student to conclude the dissertation. I will believe faster and efficiently.
As much as possible, the advice is always for students to try to make any paper that they write directly related to the dissertation. So the earlier you know what you're going to write about, and the more you can tailor your course papers and early degree assignments towards that topic, the better prepared you're going to be to write the dissertation quickly.
True. One of the things that we hear about PhD comes also with grants, because obviously I think that each year in the PhD, tuition fees are getting higher. So there's that old saying of the willing is more about having financial power than having the desire to it. I think it fits almost perfectly for whoever wants to do PhD. But obviously, there's other solutions like having grants and to aid those tuition fees, and also the student loans, obviously. But here, for the grants are helpful, but they're still competitive. And to write an application, it's even more harder to convince those who will grant that scholarship to that PhD candidate. I have a question for you, Dr. Roda, and also for Dr. Saunders to participate. So do you think that not having a PhD grant increases the rate of dropping out of the PhD, even though they have the opportunity to reapply?
So in the United States, there's two different types of models for doctoral programs. Some of them are what we call funded programs, and some are not. And many of the brick and mortar universities have funded programs where the doctoral student is given a small living stipend to help cover their expenses, and there is no tuition. Now, in these programs, which are very competitive to get into, there's also the expectation that the doctoral student will be a teaching assistant or a research assistant or a lab tech. Basically, the doctoral student is working for the university and in exchange is also receiving the stipend and a tuition-free degree. Now, that is very uncommon in the online programs. So online programs, they don't typically have that as an option, but what they do have is the flexibility for someone to pursue the degree on their own schedule while working their own job that they currently have. And so every program has its advantages and disadvantages. And it's kind of up for each student to see where they are in life and what is going to work for their needs. When I was going to get my degree, I was only interested in the programs that would offer me a stipend because I wasn't prepared to take on debt. I didn't have a job. So, so I didn't have a career or like savings per se. And so it was, woohoo, someone's going to pay me to read books. Yay. But also that meant I had to go in person to that place and teach there. And there wasn't that other flexibility. But I can absolutely understand now as later in life with family and children and a job that if I were trying to pursue a degree at this moment in time, it would be a huge ask to uproot my entire family and move to another city where I could be a teaching assistant in order to get that stipend. And going to get a degree online would make a lot more sense. So, it's complicated is kind of the short answer to your question. And it really depends on the student. You mentioned, is it contributing to students not finishing? And I would say probably is, but I think the bigger issue is how well is that process going?
Sure.
I think students who are breezing through their coursework and are conducting their research quickly and are having a good time in graduate school, regardless of that financial situation, they're the ones who are going to finish. They'll make it happen one way or another. Whereas I feel like if it's not going well and someone's experiencing a lot of delays and challenges, then, the debt situation can be a real, can tip the scale, and
Sure.
make someone to think about, okay, well, maybe this isn't working well enough for me to want to continue. It's a really tough decision for anyone to make. But I think, again, it varies greatly from one program to the next and from one student to the next.
Sure. No, I totally understand and agree, and it comes, as we were speaking previously, is the hardship with life struggles, and even not even studying full time, both PhD and working full time as well, and also so that's why some of those grants are for many PhD student candidates are so important to aid some of those life struggles, and even the loan. But the loan is, well, have the loan and then have to pay that debt, which will take longer, and it depends whether the PhD student, when it becomes a graduate PhD, takes time to find a job, which is even more harder. So, any opinions from you, Dr. Saunders, upon the grants?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just completely agree that if you want to complete the degree, then it's just about looking at which type of degree makes the most sense given where you are in your life and what is going to motivate you, whether that's complete focus on the dissertation or having other supplementary responsibilities. In terms of the grant writing and applications, I think that's also something that's important for PhD students throughout the process, but especially those who are early in the process to think about, because there's a lot to researching what grants you're eligible for and how to apply for them. And that is a time-consuming process, but an important one. And if you get started on that early and find many grants to apply for, your odds of success at those are going to be much higher. And that skill of learning how to apply for and receive funding is incredibly transferable for moving into a postdoc or the rest of an academic career, or especially if you're going to move into an industry job. I would have a hard time imagining any job where being able to seek and receive a great deal of funding is not a valuable skill.
Sure.
That's something to hone as early in the process as you can, and certainly to articulate on your CV or in any job interview you find yourself in.
Sure. No, it's absolutely 100%. Those, when it comes to those issues of writing the application, then there will be a plus skill to add, which will be the resilience, and also that would be reflected upon after the PhD to apply for more grants and applying for other jobs and getting more network. But then comes as well with writing issues, and nowadays there's plenty of writing solutions, and say Dissertation Editor is one of them to provide those helpful solutions. Well, I hope I'm not step on the wrong side of the road, but so those writing solutions, and one of them that I was researching and you were talking about on the book was about the popular name of it, ChatGPT. Correct me if I'm wrong. I read it on the book, and however, there are many academics and even students during the committees and even in conversations, casual conversations, they consider ChatGPT dangerous and enticing to plagiarism. However, I think there's another side of it, and it can be a powerful tool to avoid plagiarism if used wisely throughout the dissertation. But does that the problem, Dr. Saunders, the problem of using ChatGPT passes on the PhD student being lazy to research and write an original thesis, or the lack of guidance and advice from the PhD advisor to motivate the student, or is it both?
That's a great question, and I think it's still very much developing. So my short answer would be, I think we've got to wait and see how because I think it has the potential to change the academic landscape. I think depending on how it ends up becoming increasingly monetized, whether it's just data-based or if it becomes subscription-based, what the direction of the finances of those types of services go, and how that starts to be used more by those in higher education, both the students and the professors. I think it's an incredibly developing situation that I intend to keep a close eye on. But secondly, I think it would be the kind of thing that, like any type of software, any type of research process, I think it can be used really well if it's used intentionally, or I think it can be very easily misused. So I think the baseline is that it depends on how the individual in question wants to use it. I don't think there'll ever be a substitute for really carefully attributing your sources, thinking about which ideas, really belong to you and which ones were informed by a previous scholar. So I think that I would see its potential not so much being in the avoidance of plagiarism, because I still think the only way to avoid plagiarism is by that really intentional scholarship, but I can see it being a really effective tool for research in terms of casting a broad net, conducting the early stages of a systematic literature review. Those are kind of the things that occur to me that I think it could end up really being helpful if used correctly. And I think both students and professors could fall into the trap of becoming overly reliant on it. So that's something to really watch out for. I think if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. If it's saving you an inordinate amount of time that you should be spending on something, that's probably when you're falling into a trap. When it's helping you do something better that you're spending a ton of time on, like research, then I think that's where it can be used well.
I do agree, and that is, I think that, as you said, that ChatGPT is a recent tool that we are recently exploring it, and we still don't know how to do it well, but it's just trying to attempt it and play it around. And I think one of the core issues is, and I can give the example of undergrad students that I've seen as a teaching assistant, that I've seen undergraduate students using ChatGPT for the whole text, and which can be easily detectable through other software issues such as Turnitin, which we use a lot here to do the marking, the assessment marking. And I think that's one of the things. If that applies to a PhD, I don't know, depends. If the person wants to complete the PhD fast, and the advisor has to be having a good eyesight to detect that. I mean, if we use it wisely, then could be a powerful tool to use it.
You know, the American Psychology Association, APA, which is this for citation standards, has already determined the appropriate way to cite AI.
Sure.
So if you have written a paper and you've used AI to, improve your abstract, and you want to cite that, or you should cite that, is basically the new standard. And I think we're still waiting to see what that will really mean for academia. But for now, at least, the baseline is, if you're going to use it, own it and put a citation at the end that says that you used it, and then, go on from there.
Sure. And it's about if using it, as we said, wisely, in terms of, okay, so I have this chunk of text, I'm going to use it for a bit, but I'm going to use ChatGPT, and the AI does its magic. But at the same time, I think the student has to be precise in what student wants to use ChatGPT for it. And if he uses the whole text, either the student, the PhD candidate, has to adapt it with its own language, then using the whole thing for the ChatGPT, because it will be easily detected by any advisor.
Well, and it goes back to what Lauren said. I mean, it's kind of an honor question. If it feels like cheating, it probably is.
Yeah.
And, the APA is thinking about this being used in scientific research that isn't necessarily for the purpose of academic credit. What happens when the lab just wants to share their results, and they have this data, they've got these results, and they've got these tools to generate this paper that helps them share their data and their results with the wider world? No one's asking the lab to prove that they're worthy of a degree. So it doesn't have that academic integrity piece to it. Whereas AI in the university setting, that's a whole different can of worms. And we're all kind of waiting to see what types of policies institutions of higher education are going to, put into place. It's too new, and I don't think any university has made an official statement about it yet.
Sure.
But I would expect those to start coming soon, like within a year.
So probably there's here should be like a training, a free training course to use ChatGPT,
as they use as well in ChatGPT. Yeah. As they
also use in how to cite, how to do footnote citations whether through APA or Chicago or Harvard style, they should be also using for ChatGPT. But do you believe, Dr. Saunders and Dr. Roda, do you believe that that training course will appear in due soon, or maybe in a few years?
I think it's a wonderful idea. I can see, university libraries wanting to run something like that. I mean, I think that I will probably take this idea and try to start brainstorming something like that myself. I would like to be involved in putting something like that together. So I think it will absolutely emerge shortly. And I think training courses, webinars on the ethical use of ChatGPT would be a really useful tool for students and anyone else in higher education as well.
And I think we're still waiting for the institutions to kind of determine exactly where those boundaries are. This is a new frontier for academic integrity policies. And so once those get set in place, then it's time to start training how to work within them.
Yes, of course. And for me personally, I do believe that ChatGPT or any other source of AI to aid writing style and structure is to stay and has to be applied wisely. They can scan over the whole text, but then it comes to the student. If the student wants to be PhD candidate, in this case, wants to have an excellent dissertation, then has to adapt to its own language, to its own structure, and then a few lines of the writing AI to solutionate the problem. So, and that was it. Now, as we are approaching to the end of our fantastic interview, I would say first and foremost, what you both of you do in Dissertation Editor, in summary, to help PhD candidates while hearing our session in terms of writing styling structure.
I mean, Dissertation Editor, we work with students from start to finish.
Sure.
We have a very strict academic integrity policy. So I think it's worth mentioning we do not write content for any students at any time, ever. But we coach people on finding their topics. We help people with finding sources for their literature reviews. We will assist people in selecting the appropriate methodology for the research questions they're trying to answer. And we have an entire statistics division dedicated to help people with their qualitative or quantitative analysis. So pretty much anything that we can take off the plate that isn't the ideas of the dissertation, we're set up to help people with that part. So whatever that challenge that they're facing, whether they're stuck on the methods or the writing or the formatting, we're there to help. And so at the end of the process, we do full editing of the draft. We do critical feedback on how to improve the argument and make it better. Mm-hmm. And we can help people prepare for their defense. We'll do a Zoom session like this and ask them the kinds of questions they might anticipate having so that when they go into the defense, they feel confident and ready to enjoy themselves talking about their research and not, completely white-knuckled over, what's going to happen when they walk in that room. And importantly, too, we also help people publish their research. So many people think of the dissertation as the end of the road, and then they've got the degree and their PhDone, as we would say. But I think it's really important to get your research out in a place where some people will actually read it.
Sure.
Very few people read dissertations, but lots of people read books and journal articles. So we encourage pretty much anyone, if you've put this much time into researching your topic so deeply and passionately, do the research, the service and the justice of allowing it to be seen in the wider world. And I feel really passionate about that because so many people, I think, just get the degree and they're done and they don't want to look at it anymore. So a service we offer is dissertation to book and dissertation to article conversions, where we work with students to help them publish that research and get it out into the world.
Sure. And that is fantastic. And whoever is listening to this amazing late night interview, I'd say to any PhD candidate, go seek Dissertation Editor. They can help you with your struggles, and you will excel in your PhD. That's I would say for the listeners.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. But before we end, I would say to know more about it, do you have any social media? Dr. Saunders, Dr. Roda?
Yes, so we're both on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Dr. Lauren Saunders. And Alan,
Sure.
I think you're Alan Roda.
I'm at Alan Roda, just that simple.
And
ALLENRODA on Instagram, TikTok, and dissertationeditor.com. It's dissertation-editor.com, but we'll put links in the description, I'm sure. And anyone who is listening to this and you've made it this far, mention PhD Lounge when you reach out to us, and we'll give you 10% off of your order at Dissertation Editor. So that's our thank you to all of your listeners and for having us on your show. We absolutely have loved being here.
No, thank you very much to both of you for reaching me out, demonstrating your interest. I'd say to the students, make sure to add to your shelves PhDone. It is an incredible tool, and you will get fascinated when you're going to read it, as I was as well, before making the questions. So, yeah.
It's coming out August 8th, so it's available for pre-order now, and we think it'll be a tremendously valuable resource. And please look it up. It's available at all the places where you would find books.
So, and that is it. Dr. Roda, Dr. Saunders, thank you again for coming here. And I look forward to hear more about Dissertation Editor, and both from you as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to all the listeners who tuned to this amazing late night interview with two PhD graduates and authors of PhDone. I hope that you have enjoyed hearing Drs. Alan Roda and Lauren Saunders talking about PhDone, Dissertation Editor, and thoughts on doing a PhD degree, with all the professional and personal struggles many candidates have throughout that arduous road of the Doctor of Philosophy. This late night interview will be published on the 8th of August, day of the release of PhDone, just to have a special double gift for you while you tune in to this session and read or hear the book. If you are interested in knowing more about Drs. Roda and Saunders, then check out their social media and Dissertation Editor website, where you can find more about their passion in helping PhD students with their dissertations around the world. Furthermore, for those who are struggling in achieving success in their PhD writing and need some help, Dissertation Editor helps you editing, formatting, proofreading, and data analysis your dissertation. And if it is your first time and you are a listener of PhD Lounge, you will get a 10% discount. From here onwards, in each solo session and late night interviews, Dissertation Editor will be the main sponsor. Wherever you are hearing this late night interview on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify for Podcasters, or any other podcast platform, as well as on Twitch and on the website phdlounge.co.uk, thank you for leaving a review or feedback to help PhD Lounge outreaching more listeners and PhD candidates and graduates who want to have an interview or write a blog about their experience as first-year PhD students. Feel free also to make a donation by clicking on the donation tab, where you can find different links to make your donations to develop PhD Lounge. Make sure to also follow the social media. Facebook, PhD Pod Launch, Instagram, PhD LMF, Twitter, @PhD Launchcast, and Threads, whose my account is the same one as Instagram, as I joined recently. Thank you all for tuning in. It has been a pleasure.